Hi, everyone, and welcome to Café IBTTA. I'm Pat Jones. My guest today is Steve Snider. He's the General Manager and CEO of the Halifax Harbour Bridges. As one of the longest-serving CEOs of a tolling authority in North America, Steve is in his 28th year. He's responsible for the overall operations, maintenance, and administration of the Angus L. Macdonald and A. Murray McKay bridges. These critical pieces of infrastructure account for 34 million crossings a year. Through his many years of experience, Steve is a respected leader with the tolling and transportation sectors across North America. Steve is a past president of IBTTA in 2010 and a past chair of the International Cable Supported Bridge Operators Association, also known as ICEBOA. A graduate of St. Mary's University, Steve also received his ICDD through the Institute of Corporate Directors. Steve was also one of the first CEOs to sign the Nova Scotia Health and Safety Leadership Charter. He's a past Commodore of the Dartmouth Yacht Club. Steve, welcome to Café IBTTA. It's great to have you with us.
Thanks, Pat. It's a pleasure to join you this morning. I'm happy to be here.
Well, this is Café IBTTA, where we drink coffee and talk about things that are interesting, relevant, uplifting, and fun. And this morning, I have a big shout out to three individuals and groups of people. First, a shout out to the Council of Platinum sponsors, led by Tyler Milligan of Milligan Partners. We thank them for their thought leadership and financial support throughout this year and throughout our pandemic. Second, a big shout out to New Jersey DOT Commissioner Diane Scicchetti, who's also the first vice president of IBTTA, who met with US DOT Secretary Pete Buttigieg this week as he visited the state to talk with mayors and to tour some transportation facilities. And finally, a big shout out to the US Senate for passing a long-awaited bipartisan $1 trillion infrastructure bill, which will provide the largest infusion of federal aid into infrastructure projects in the United States in more than a decade. We'll have more to say about that in the coming days, and watch your email. Well, we are taking your questions and comments, and we want to get started right away. As some of you know, Steve Snider is a sailing enthusiast. So I would ask you to put a comment in the chat function, selecting all panelists and attendees. If you were sailing with Steve Snider out of Halifax, Nova Scotia, where would you like to go? Where would you wish to sail? Let's take a look. You can put that in the chat function. Where are you going to sail with Steve Snider? All right. We got some good spots here, Steve. Iceland, Bermuda, the British Virgin Islands, up to Cape Breton and eat some lobster rolls. New Zealand, Ted Hall Ride. He's in this for the long haul. All right. Ireland, Montego Bay. Anywhere, says Rob Hoare. He is a great sailor. All right. Well, I'm glad you all have your trust in Steve Snider, in his sailing abilities. And Steve, it's nice to know that you've got some friends who want to travel different places with you. Well, we'll come back to some of those destinations, but first I want to start talking to Steve and finding out a little bit more about you. You've been in the tolling and transportation business for 28 years. Tell us a little bit about how you cut your teeth in this business and how you got to where you are today.
Well, I guess I would describe myself as an accidental member of the transportation industry. Out of university, I got into food processing. I worked for a large multinational company with about 12,000 employees, and we processed fish, fresh and frozen, and shipped it around the world. In Canada, back in the 90s, we had trouble with our fish stocks, and a number of facilities were shut down, and so I was looking to find alternate employment. I actually started out in transportation in transit. I worked for a transit company for about a year, small transit company. We had a fleet of about 60 buses. And then I had a call from a headhunting firm. I'd seen the job for the Bridge Commission posted in the ads, but the finance part seemed too challenging for me. But after a discussion with the headhunter, I discovered that if you can do a home mortgage, you can do the financing that you need to for transportation facilities. So the rest was history. I joined the commission, and it's been a great career, a great opportunity. The biggest part of it is, of course, all the people that I've worked with over the years, and the sharing that we do, because we're largely non-competitive. So it's been tremendous. So that's me and my work history, and how I came to be here.
Steve, you raised the issue of working with people over all those many years. Talk to us a little bit about the people aspect of the job. You know, this is something that can get overlooked. People are focusing on the technical aspects, the technology, the individual skills that you may need to have as a CEO. Talk about the people aspect of the job.
I've described to my board and to my staff that my most important job, Pat, is to hire well. And you know, most often we can find the skill sets we need. That is, that we can find the people who have the engineering knowledge or the IT knowledge or the human resource knowledge. But what's most important is that we find the people that are willing to come here and work as a team with the team. The most important thing when it comes to hiring is fit. And without the fit, I mean, I'd take somebody that we have to you know, send off for some additional training or development skill wise, but they need to have the fit. And so that's been the most important thing for me. And it's been one of my pleasures. I mean, we hire people and they develop and they stay here for 10 or 15 years and they get hired away and paid twice as much somewhere else. But you know, I take that as a credit to the organization and the fact that we develop great people.
It's a compliment to the organization when somebody leaves for a better job, that you've been able to train them and they've been able to work cooperatively with you for a period of time, and then they get to move to something even bigger and better.
It's like watching your children grow up and develop and move out.
Steve, let's talk a little bit about the infrastructure. If you could tell us first a little bit about Halifax Harbour bridges, what it entails, a little bit about the scope, and then I'd like to we'll migrate into a special project that you undertook.
Pretty straightforward. You know, we're a city of about 450,000 people. We're growing tremendously. The first bridge was opened here in 1955, year before I was born. It was they'd actually had two bridges built earlier, but they both collapsed. One in a storm and one in the silence of the night. That would have been located where the new bridge, the McKay Bridge, was. But they opened, you know, after World War II was over and people came back, and Dartmouth was growing, so they built this bridge and opened it up. It was so successful in helping Dartmouth develop that the demand grew tremendously, and within 15 years we opened our second bridge, which was the McKay Bridge. So it was opened in 1970. The McKay Bridge, and we'll touch on this later, was the first orthotropic steel deck on a suspension bridge in North America. And it was built, the plate on the deck is only about 9 millimeters thick. And by today's standards, I think it would require about 14 millimeters. So it's that's part of what's leading us down the road with the McKay Bridge. But so these two bridges currently have about 34 million crossings. When I started here 20 some years ago, we had about 28 million crossings. Interestingly enough, in 2005, after 50 years of operation, we celebrated our 1,000th crossing. I noted in looking at some numbers just yesterday that we'll be experiencing our 1.5 billionth crossing.
Wow.
Next February. So 15 years, 16 years for $500 million, but 50 years for the first billion. So
you'll be able to have a big sign on the bridge, you know, in red and gold letters that say billions and billions served, huh?
Absolutely. We'll you know, it's the Macdonald Bridge. What else are we going to do?
Of course.
When we named our toll system MacPass, it was already trademarked by the McDonald's, and I was hoping they would come after us and challenge us and take us to court so we could get some free exposure, but it never happened. So,
well, maybe we'll get some free legal advice here from the people who are viewing, and I know the engineers who are watching are already geeking out because I wrote down the word orthotropic that you used to describe the McKay Bridge. So love to have some comments and suggestions and questions from our engineers in the audience. And speaking of engineering, Steve, so you build these bridges to last a long time, but they don't last forever. And you had a bridge that you wanted to extend the life, and you started this project called the Big Lift. Tell us a little bit more about that.
This was we had difficulty with the deck separating from the top chord, or actually the bottom chord of the truss of the former structure, and so this project had been done once before, and it's a replacement of the entire truss and road deck system on an overnight basis, reopening the bridge to traffic after the installation of each segment. In this case, I believe we had about 48 different segments that were installed. The first 30 some were 60 feet long, and then we moved into a series that were 30 feet long. This was a photograph that was taken multiple times during the project, but this was during the installation of the last segment. And the last segment is actually down below in the harbor, waiting to be lifted up. And as we frequently have here in Halifax, we had a foggy night, and the fog closed in, and the photographer caught this image of the bridge sort of dangling in space with a segment missing, and this became the iconic photograph for the project. It was a project that we started back in about 2010, and we actually just are going to have full wrap up on it, hopefully in the next couple of months. We budgeted at 205 million. I think we finished about 210. It was significantly disruptive to our communities, but we had a great communications plan, and we actually, this bridge was the only bridge that accommodates pedestrians and cyclists. So we ended up setting up a 24/7 shuttle service that cost us about $1.75 million over the life of the project, so we could shuttle people back and forth across the harbor via either this bridge or the other bridge, depending on which was open. So this was an iconic project for us, and we actually had the opportunity to host the International Cable Supported Bridge Operators Association in 2016 in the midst of this project. So all these bridge people got to come see what was happening.
Now, Steve, as I understand, you never closed the bridge. You didn't close it permanently while this was going on. These kinds of things were happening in the middle of the night. Is that correct?
Initially, the intent was for the segments to be replaced overnight. The contractor was challenged to do that, and we ended up shifting from nighttime replacements to weekend replacements. So essentially, the bridge was open Monday to Friday from 5:30 in the morning until 7 in the evening. Otherwise, it was closed for the replacement. So it would have been easier to describe when the bridge was open versus when it was closed. But we were accommodating, our peak hour traffic Monday to Friday. Normally here between the two bridges, we run about 105,000 vehicles a day, Monday to Friday, and on the weekends it's 60,000 to 70,000. So lower volumes.
And so closing over the weekend, that probably helped the cadence of the process where you didn't have to start and stop every day.
Absolutely. It got into, having the 2.5 days to do that work made quite a difference. And the contractor got some wind in their sails, and it moved along quite nicely.
This is Café IBTTA. Our guest is Steve Snider, the General Manager and CEO of the Halifax Harbour Bridges. We are taking your questions. If you have a question, please put it in the chat function and select the option for all panelists and attendees. We would love to hear your questions. Now, Steve, you can't do a project like that without having a very high regard for safety. In fact, you want safety front and center in every aspect of operating a bridge like this. Steve, tell us a little bit about your safety program and your commitment to safety at HHB.
Way back in my food processing career, I had some good training and some good mentors on safety. And I thought I knew what safety was about. I came here to the Bridge Commission and we made a number of improvements and changes. But we did it, you know, everybody was doing it off the corner of their desk. We didn't have a dedicated safety manager. But about 12 years ago, we hired a safety manager because we realized that we wanted to up our game. When I hired the safety manager, his first comment to me was, you know, safety will only be successful here if it's driven from the top. Safety has to be absolutely critical to our leadership. If it's not critical to the leadership, then nobody else will pay attention to it. And he was absolutely right. And since then, I've become a safety champion for the organization. Our organizational goal is to ensure that all of our employees go home safely at the end of each and every shift, each and every day, and that our contractors are also safe. During my time here, we have had a contractor who died as a result of a workplace injury. And that was, it's pretty devastating. But in terms of all of our organizations, I implore every executive director and CEO to take full ownership of your safety program and ensure that you communicate to your staff how important it is to you and why it's important to you. And through that, you know, you look at engaging all of your employees and that they start looking out for each other, that they will coach each other. It's, you know, we've just recently, Pat, we're celebrating 1,000 days with no lost time injuries at Halifax Harbour bridges.
Congratulations.
And so we're, thank you. We're very proud of that accomplishment, and our employees are. When we do our employee surveys, the one thing that they are most proud of is our record here with safety. You know, we also talk to our employees about EDI and how we can look at improving things. And they say to us, if we could approach it the same way we have with our safety program. So to me, that was very encouraging. And
Steve,
if anybody ever wants to talk about safety and what you can do to make it successful, give me a shout.
I think Ted Hull Ride in his sailing from Halifax to New Zealand, maybe you'll have enough time to talk about safety during that journey.
Love to do that.
Steve, you're talking about how the CEO needs to take the lead on safety. Reminds me of a CEO roundtable that we had several weeks back, in which we were talking about IT and cybersecurity, and that same sentiment came across there, in which the CEO, people asserted that the CEO really has to be the champion for this. And one CEO confessed to the fact that they even have tests with email, for instance, and send emails that you're not supposed to open. And, you know, if you're smart, if you're well trained, you won't open it. And the CEO actually did open. So that person had to get some additional coaching.
I'm gonna toot my own horn here. That's called penetration testing. And during our last penetration test, the email looked really good. And I noted it. And so I sent a question to our IT department. They didn't respond to me about it. And so just to make sure, because I thought they may be away from their desk, I sent an email out to the other senior staff advising them of this email that I had received. And so I got 2 check marks that day because, number one, I didn't open the email. And number 2, I alerted others. And so I got a little gold star for my lapel that day.
Gold star. All right.
Yeah.
Well done. Well done. Well, there's other areas in life where you can earn gold stars, Steve, and I'm thinking about the environment, sustainability, and climate change. One of your themes, or one word in your theme as president in 2010 had to do with sustainability. And in fact, at the annual meeting in 2010, our keynote speaker was a gentleman by the name of Chris Jordan, who is a photographer and an environmental activist. And I wonder if you would tell us a little bit about your commitment to sustainability and protection of the environment.
I make sure in our household that we do all we can for recycling, that the plastics go into one container and the bottles in another. And so our personal commitment to the environment has to start with what we do ourselves. We can make all kinds of decisions, but backing up a little bit, I remember being concerned about the environment when I was in grade 9, grade 10. That was 50 years ago back. As a society, we've unfortunately, I think, largely ignored our impact in a lot of cases on the environment. There's a lot of good things happening, and sometimes we spend. I could spend more time looking at the downside than the upside. So we should note that there are a lot of good things taking place, and we just need to all help move that forward. Us in the transportation industry, really need to be part of the solution. My theme in 2010 was driving sustainability, and we've talked about it throughout the industry. Our job is to help move people and goods, not the cars and trucks. Cars and trucks currently are a big part of those modes, but there are other things that we can look at. I believe that environmental commitment is local, regional, and national. I see a lot of great things coming out of Europe. I see some good things happening here in North America. Our commitment to the electrification of the fleets of our vehicles, a lot of us have depended on, felt that technology would make the difference. Technology is what we build, it's what we develop, it's what we sell, it's what we use, but it's personal commitments to first of all, we've got to pay for our carbon footprint. We've spent 200 years dumping a lot of carbon into the atmosphere, and now we're paying the piper. Unfortunately, I see, where our friends in Greece are suffering huge fires. The west coast of North America has been burning up. We're either scorching and burning, or flooding and drowning. And some people still say, well, is that really environmental, climate change, or is it just natural? I think if I'm an odds guy and I'm working on risk, I think we've got to do what we can to try to bring about some change ourselves, and build in some capacity. Anyway, I could go on a little bit. Maybe I'm stuttering here, but I just ask that people really think about what they can do individually, and also what we have our politicians do for us.
Thank you, Steve. And I want to salute you for being a co-chair of IBTTA's Task Force on Sustainability and Resilience, along with Pedro Costa of the Northwest Parkway in Colorado. And anyone who's interested in learning more about the activities of this task force, you can write to me, you can write to Steve, or write to Mark Muriello, our Director of Policy and Government Affairs, who is the staff liaison to that group. And we'd love to have your thoughts and your input.
Thanks for that, Pat, but I feel I've been dragging a little bit on that. Mark and Pedro really are our leaders, but yes, absolutely. If we could just figure out how to share, in this organization, what our different, entities are doing, just sharing will make a big difference.
Steve, thinking about all these issues, climate change, safety, the environment, doing your job day to day can be a stressful experience, and you've adopted some practices for stress release, and I'd love to have you tell us a little bit more about them. Maybe there's a hint about it in the picture behind you.
A little bit, yes. I was a gardener until I bought a boat, and now I'm into boat maintenance more, and my wife Patty has taken over the gardening. But still, we call our time in the garden that it's garden yoga, because getting down on your knees and bending over and digging out plants and separating them and planting seeds and watching them grow and having a green yard with lots of trees. So that's the garden yoga, and you can feel it the next day. It's like, oh, I had a good day in the garden. And then there's also, boat yoga. And for those who I have the pleasure, of course, of being on the helm, but the rest of my crew, they do the grinding and the hauling. it takes me, Pat, about 30 to 35 minutes from leaving my office, driving to the boat club, getting on the boat, getting some sails ready and some lines tied and some sheets tied, and then casting off. And when I leave that dock, everything that has been bothering me that day or that week, it blows away in the wind. And my crew and I get out there. There's a little bit of stress with what we do if it's racing, but it's very different stress, and it's tremendous. We all need in our lives some ways of dealing with our stress, and ideally it's exercise or meditation. I do a lot of low-level meditating when I'm on the boat. I just watch it for seals and whales, or looking at the shoreline as it passes by. So it's made a difference in my life.
Mindfulness, you're being aware of different things.
Yeah.
Than
and my shout out to Rob Hoare. He took the time years ago to invite myself and some others to go sailing with him. And in fact, one of my greatest trips was with Frank McCartney and Kerry Witt and Rob out sailing. And but after sailing with Rob, I went off and took lessons, and Patty and I bought the boat, and we've never looked back. And we cruised for a couple of years, and then we get into racing. In fact, one of the highlights in my sailing career was a couple of years ago. I got to hop on with a friend of mine and bring his boat from the British Virgin Islands up to Bermuda, and then Bermuda up to Halifax. And there was things you see out there that you never see anywhere else. So.
Steve, having a boat like having a bridge requires maintenance. And I know that that's a big issue for you as well. And we talked earlier about when you're building something, the importance of designing maintenance into the process. Say a little bit more about that.
Well, Pat, we spent $210 million rebuilding the Macdonald Bridge, the old Macdonald Bridge. And during that, we went to a lot of effort to ensure that we built maintainability into it. And that is that the maintenance staff could readily, take care of the snow and ice control issues and that we have here in this part of North America, but also access, for ongoing maintenance of the bearings and doing the paint and steel programs. And so building maintainability into the structures are critically important. And I'm pretty proud of what the team did here as we did that for the big lift for the Macdonald Bridge. The reason it's important is that over time, first off, you need to make sure that you've got good records, because when you look back to figure out what people did 50 some years ago, it can be a challenge. But no, and also you need to build in the safety elements for the bridges, access, because remember, it takes people to get out there and look after these. So very important.
Steve, I'm going to make a couple of announcements, and then we're going to come back to you for some final words of wisdom. So first of all, everyone, don't forget to complete the survey that you'll receive at the end of today's program so we can know what you think and how we can get better. We have several upcoming events. August 19th, the Leadership Academy Alumni Association virtual social, trivia night, and fundraiser for the foundation. September 9th is the IBTTA Book Club hosted by the Task Force on Diversity, Social, and Racial Inclusion. We'll be looking at the book Caste, The Origins of Our Discontent by Isabel Wilkerson. Other events coming up, watch your email and the IBTTA website. Most important of all is the IBTTA annual meeting is happening in Anaheim, October 10 through 12. This is very important, folks. More than 200 people are already in the hotel, almost that many registered for the meeting. Get your hotel reservation and take advantage of IBTTA's early bird registration fee. We are getting back together, and we can't wait to see you. And then our last meeting of the year, November 4 through 6, is the Maintenance, Engineering, and Roadway Operations Workshop in Louisville, Kentucky. And don't forget to complete the survey at the end of today's Café IBTTA. Well, Steve, what final words of wisdom do you have before we sign off?
Pat, that would be that we all should remember that we're in the customer service business, that we have a lot of customers who depend on us. The timeliness of our transportation systems are critical for them, to ensure that they can get their children to soccer on time, that they get to work on time, that they get their wife to the hospital on time for the delivery of that baby. During the Big Lift project, we unfortunately had a couple of failures on the early end. On a Monday morning, we didn't open the Macdonald Bridge until 9:30, the first Monday morning, and that was hellish. But to add insult to injury, the following Friday, we didn't get the bridge open until 2:30 in the afternoon instead of 5:30 in the morning. One person said a tweet that said, when we finally got it open, "Oh, I'm so glad they got it open because I didn't think they'd have it open in time to close tonight again." But following that, I had somebody share with us a bit of a humorous Christmas card indicating that customer service was important for all. And this was the Christmas card I received in the mail, and Santa was a little frustrated, but we've shown this a few times. So we're the customer service business. Focus on the customers.
Steve, thanks so much for being with us on the show today and for your words of wisdom. We really appreciate it. And to all IBTTA members and viewers, whether you're members or not, thanks for being with us. Be safe, keep in touch, and we'll see you down the road. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, everybody.
Take care. Have a good one.